Welcome to Common Sense and Consequences, where we sit down with Montanans from every walk of life to talk honestly about what's happening in our communities, at our capital, and in our daily lives. Today we have Audrey Walleser-Martin, and I'm Rachel Burright, your host. And we're going to start this conversation off right where we left the last one, touching on the state fire policy. In the legislature, there were a couple of bills that were proposed, and I just want to touch on this because this is your specialty. Tell me about these different bills. I know you're right on top of it, and what are they proposing, and are they any good?
So probably the main two bills that we saw come through was one specifically talking about the federal fire policy, and that was talking about how in Montana, because of specific wording in our Constitution, that we're just going to go trouncing up on anybody's land, no matter who it belongs to. We're going to put the fire out, and we're going to send you a bill. The amount of things that are wrong with that are too abundant to discuss in one sitting. There's a private property rights issue. There's an issue of state and federal ground. There's an issue of jurisdictional thing. There's just all sorts of things that are wrong with that. I understand the premise. They want fires put out small. They want them controlled. It's really interesting when I saw that. I was thinking about there used to be this policy back in the 20s and 30s about the 10 a.m. policy, and that all fires would be put out by 10 a.m. And there's immense amounts of research about why that policy was bad, why it actually created the fire issues we have today. And I'm like, wow, we've actually taken a step backwards. Now we're just going to do the same thing over again. So I think the legislator had the best of intentions. I just don't necessarily think that the execution was probably appropriate or well done. I think part of that comes on the heels of this idea that we're going to have one central wildland fire agency, that's kind of the buzz and the hope right now with an executive order, that we're going to control and put everybody underneath one agency.
Like from the state or from the federal level?
Like everybody who fights wildland fire is going to be combined underneath this one particular agency. Mm-hmm. We're going to create it, and it's all going to work seamlessly. And those of us in the industry are going, we can't even agree on, simple things. Like this would be absolutely impossible to execute. And I know that Senator Sheehy's kind of leading that up. And I think that, again, it's the best of intentions, but the practicality of that is so kind of far out there that I just really wish they would talk to industry experts and people who understand that on a state and local level and who do this every day of our lives to understand that there's ways we can do things and there's ways that just won't work.
Right.
We're just not to that point yet.
Well, I think a lot of the public, we just assume that if you're making a law about it, and we know we have lobbyists and what we would call experts for all these things, I think there's a level of assumption that we have that you are being consulted.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've seen in this legislative session, there were a couple bills that I usually try to track the fire bills, but there were a couple of them that completely caught me off guard. And I had people who were like, hey, what about this bill? I didn't even know it was in the hopper, didn't know anything about it, didn't have it on my radar. And so these things just kind of pop up randomly or was kind of pushed in towards the end, or we thought something was dead and then it resurrects again. And so it's just kind of was a really interesting session for that. So being able to track those was really difficult because they kind of come and went, and it was really interesting. So
yeah, the level of resurrections happening over there are quite off the charts. What really struck me, I'm looking at HB 130 here, is that yes, basically we go in and put out the fire. And then if it's within 5 miles of a department or county wildland fire protection, and then you send the federal government a bill for it. And we get to do this because of our Montana Constitution, where we have guaranteed a clean and healthful environment, which is not the same language that's in our federal Constitution. And so, hey, we're going to add this language, and we're going to make sure that you're responsible for paying for it.
And the other thing it's going to do is that in many places, state agencies, local fire departments, all that, have relationships. There are relationships that we've built with our partners, federal partners, state partners, county partners, whatever that is. And we have those relationships. So what this does is it strains all those years of working together and training together and doing these things together. And now we have this law, and it's like, we're just going to go do this, and sucks to be you. Sorry, you're bad luck. And I just don't people think, again, I would have loved to encourage the creators of this bill, the creators of this federal wildland fire, group or agency. I'm like, come right along with one of us. I mean, I know Senator Sheehy's, with Bridger Aerospace has his airplanes. Let's get out of the plane and come down to the ground, and let's go through an IMT team. Let's go through, get on an engine. I'll be more than happy to take you. Go out with a PIO and look at what's going on the line. Those perspectives are much different.
I bet.
And I really would have encouraged a lot of that to happen, and it just doesn't. I think people have the best of intentions. Good plan, poor execution.
So, looking forward here to the future, if we have some legislators or even members of the public that are really interested in learning the full scope and being part of the solution, hey, how can we create legislation that really is effective and usable, workable, that we can execute well? Is that something that you can facilitate?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have Department of Natural Resource Conservation has an amazing fire prevention team. They have some amazing public information officers. They have some amazing just institutional knowledge that can be tapped into. The U.S. Forest Service the same way, BIA, BLM, all of those other land agencies have that as well. I mean, visiting with local fire departments, having those conversations with people who are on the ground, having those conversations with private contractors who are, the private entities of that, and having those conversations absolutely can happen. I just wish we would have done this long before we get to this point, because now we're going to be into a situation that I'm very certain will end up in litigation. And then that just costs Montana taxpayers more money.
It seems like such a waste. And in prior conversations that we've had here, it's been mentioned several times already that you just put forth the bill and then you make changes later in 2 years or in 4 years, or you kick it down the road. Why aren't we putting in the time now? Why are we just creating bills that, some of them just don't make sense? Why are we wasting our time and taxpayers' money? Not to mention the getting it tied up in courts. We have legal costs now. And in the meantime, who's being served?
Right.
The rest of us are just paying for it.
I think especially with fire policy, it's that we see the smoke in the air. We're going to stop. Everybody stop. We want to fix this because we don't want smoke in the air. The reality is that Montana and the West is always going to have fire. The West was born out of fire. So to just be like, we're going to make it all go away, it's completely improbable. So, I just wish there was some more back work done on those kinds of things.
Well, I hope that we can be a little bit more coordinated going forward with that. In particular, it's a big thing. And side note, I'm really looking forward to your class here, May 31st at Mountain Family Fellowship. You can find more information on our website.
Yeah.
Where Audrey will be talking about more about the wildland fire and what you can do to prepare your home, and about some insurance and a bunch of things. So I'm really looking forward to that class.
Yeah, we're going to
I'm already baking cookies.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So moving on, next topic. You are the Broadwater Committee woman.
I am.
And tell me what is it to be a committee woman?
So it's a position within the central committee, and our job is to kind of liaise between, the state party and the other Republicans and kind of help organize. I think, in my position, I believe it's about building that Republican foundation within our communities. You're kind of one of the faces of that, and you kind of liaise between the state party. You're attending the conventions, you're attending the platform things, you're attending those events, and you're bringing that information back to your community, and you're sharing it not only within your central committee, but within your entire community, and listening. And that goes both ways, taking those concerns from your community back up to the state party as well. So that's kind of how I feel.
So liaison and promoting and
Yeah.
getting everybody involved.
Yeah.
We've had a very tumultuous situation up at our legislature.
Right.
With the 9. So obviously this resolution is very needed. It's at least just part of the discussion for clarity. What happens now? You've submitted this to the GOP, and I hear we have some meetings coming up. How do we go forward with this?
So it was submitted to the GOP. So the requirement is it has to be submitted 30 days before. I submitted it more than 30 days before. It will now go to the Rules Committee to review. I would imagine that's for legality and does it fit the criteria or whatever. And then it will be up to the director or the exec, it'll be up to Don Kay and the E-Board and the Rules Committee of whether or not it's heard. And if it's heard, it will be heard during the leadership convention that's coming up the end of June.
June 27th, 28th.
That's correct.
I think.
Yep. And so who will be allowed to vote on that if it does go to it will be the chair, finance chair, committee man, and committee woman from each county. And so those are not weighted positions in this. It's just kind of a one-for-one vote. And
they're deciding to even hear it, or they're deciding to pass it?
It would be my understanding that they would be able to, whether or not it's going to be entertained for further review.
And they have the option, too, to review it and make adjustments.
Correct.
So
and that's part of the reason why I sent it out so early is that I wanted people to have, those conversations in their own central committees. Many central committees are having their county conventions. Now, looking at leadership, obviously, everybody's kind of out campaigning for leadership positions. And so we know that central committees are meeting. And I wanted to get that out there just so people could be having these conversations saying, hey, I like this. Hey, I don't. Here's why. Again, starting to have those conversations on local levels. So when they come to Helena, which is where the leadership conference is this year, we can have some good discussion about it. Or maybe even kind of have those discussions before of, well, this is what we think, this is what we don't think, and all that. Because I just think it needs to be, we've got to figure this out. It's not helping anybody to be indecisive.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, I hope that they can. I hope they can find some commonality, some common ground, and really make a clear plan, because what's the alternative?
We keep going status quo. And we saw with this session, the voters aren't happy.
Right.
I have not seen or talked to one person, and I say that literally, one person that is not part of a central committee or something like that that's directly involved with the party who went, this was the greatest session ever.
Right.
Or I haven't heard that. Everybody I hear is like, and insert whatever their issue is, and it just, and these are conservatives. I mean, we're not even, I've not heard from one person that said, oh, this was the greatest session ever, and I got, it was okay.
Well, I hope that our leadership can really lead us forward in a great direction and a clear direction. I hope that something good will come out of this meeting and it will benefit everybody. We will all at least know where we stand and can make choices accordingly.
Right. I think that's just it, is that we have to empower people to make the decision that's best for them.
Because the confusion, the not knowing, the unexpected choices, it's too much of a roller coaster for everybody. We need to know where we stand for
Absolutely.
sure. So I love that. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Absolutely.
I love that you are brave like that and are willing just to say, you know what, we have to talk about this.
It's funny because it kind of even goes back to fires. Like, one of the things with fires, you have to make clear, decisive decisions. Mm-hmm. And, like, you have to know what you know. And somebody just has to take leadership and you have to make those decisions. And I'm like, panic and hysteria kills people. And proverbially in this situation, it's going to kill our party. Yeah. So either this way or this way and just go with it. But we can't. This in-between is going to get people killed. And it's going to kill our party. And it's going to make people fracture off. And then we've got all sorts of other things to deal with. And we split votes. And we start electing people who we really don't want there. But we're going to elect them because we split the vote.
Well, and it's tough because we only have two real large parties. Mm-hmm. So, we've talked a little bit about how some of them are considering going independent or, trying to figure out where do we all fit.
Right. And the thing is there's nothing stopping someone from saying, hey, I'm going to start a Montana Independent Party or a Montana Uniparty or whatever, Montana whatever. Mm-hmm. There's statutory rules to do that. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing stopping that. But if we erode our conservative base, what does that look like? And are we okay with the results? Maybe we are. Mm-hmm. But what does that look like?
Yeah. What does that look like for our future? Mm-hmm. And for it really fractures the cohesive
Right.
unit that I think a lot of us have hoped that we had.
Right.
Turns out maybe it isn't quite so cohesive, but we like to hope. So let's move on to a fresh topic here: property taxes. Everybody I've talked to is still trying to wade through the property tax situation. There was over a page in very small print of the different property tax bills here put forth. And I've heard time and time again from different legislators that they didn't even know what they actually voted for. Nobody even understands it. But somehow they voted for them, which to me, I just don't understand that to begin with. I feel like your vote's a real responsibility. And why are you voting for something that you either haven't had time for or it hasn't been explained properly? I don't know why those votes were voted then. I just don't. But there seems to be a lot of circular thought here, a lot of stated ideals, and I'm just not seeing how we're getting the largest, tax cut in history. I'm just not seeing that in the numbers. So it sounds like you have sorted out some preliminary numbers on that. Now, you're in Broadwater County.
Right.
You're not in Lewis and Clark County.
Nope, I'm in Broadwater.
So obviously, those listening in Lewis and Clark are going to have
right. But we can talk
things.
to some generalities though, because I think there's some consistent themes of inconsistency in a lot of that.
That sounds like the perfect place to start, because that's where my brain is starting right now.
Right. So going back, we know that property taxes, income taxes, taxes in general were the number one thing that Montanans wanted addressed this session. We heard that resoundingly.
And everybody who was campaigning,
right,
that was one of the top things of every conversation.
Right.
We're running on property taxes.
Right. Lowering my property taxes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think undoubtedly everybody has said that. Ironically, we've been saying that. So a little back history is Republicans have had control of the Senate since 2011. The House is the same way. And that was even under 2 Democratic governors. So I think the voters have reached their boiling point with acceptance of kind of the same old song and dance, or the same old snake oil sale, as I like to call it. And they're like, we want this done. We can't afford to live where we've lived, where we grew up, where we raised our kids, where we want to raise our kids because of these property taxes. We want this addressed. We Montanans want this addressed. And so I don't know a single legislator who was not aware of that walking into this session. Things happen. Okay, so we get this slew of tax bills. Let's look at the personal income tax one first, because this kind of all ties together. So we have this tax bill that came out that Greg touts as the largest tax cut, personal income tax cut that we've ever seen.
Right.
Now, I will tell you off the bat, and I will hold to this, I am not a mathematician. I do not have a PhD in mathematics, anything like that. But I did some basic math. Addition and subtraction, basic math. Keeping this really simple. And we look at what is the average salary in Montana? About $50,000 to $70,000, depending on the industry. Now, granted, people are like, well, I know people who are making, yeah, I know. There's people who are making more. There are people who are making less. But for the sake of this argument, let's go with the average salary. When you math that all out and you say, okay, that you're going to give them this percentage, and you take this percentage and you divide it and you math it out, it's about $3.21 a week that we're putting back in the average taxpayer's pocket. So $3.21. What can you buy for $3.21? I don't think you can buy a soda and a candy bar for $3.21.
My son gets more allowance than that.
Right. Right.
So I
I have
don't know.
teenagers. $3.21 is a drop in the bucket to what they like. I don't think I've seen something cost $3.21 since like the 1990s, where we had like the little book orders, like where you fill out. Like I don't
You
think.
know, I remember penny candy.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be
You
great.
could get a Tootsie Roll for a penny. It was
Right.
amazing.
Exactly. However, fast forward to 2025, that doesn't do anything.
Right.
Even if you look at the higher end and you look at somebody who may be getting $200, if you look at that higher end of, they may be getting $200 a year, that's 2 bags of groceries.
Right.
That's maybe 1 water bill at a local municipality or a month and a half of that.
Right.
That is nothing. Okay, so if we're going to say this is the biggest personal income tax cut we've ever had, okay, we'll take our $3.21 every week and we'll save it and we'll be okay. Then we're going to see big results in the property tax arena and enter this slew of bills.
Right.
And we have bills that talked about school funding and talked about property tax funding and talked about all these kinds of things. And you're right. I don't think anybody really has a good grasp on this because, again, if we sat down and had these conversations or we got together and were like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, I'm not sure that occurred because we see the slew of property tax bills we had, and we're not seeing the results that Montanans needed.
Yeah, I'm going to say that probably didn't happen, that conversation. We're not really known for having amazing communication in our legislature, let alone the different organizations. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say they probably didn't coordinate with each other on that.
Which probably goes back to that whole policy coordination thing and all that we need that organization within our own party structure to have those kind of conversations in November and December before we go to the legislature. That's just a policy thing I have. So we have these ideas that now we're going to give tax rebates. Let's just talk about the rebates. Rebates are great. However, you have to go in and you have to apply for it and you have to have your geocodes and you have to have all this kind of stuff. Our most vulnerable citizens in Montana do not have access to the ability to download those forms and fill them out. And that, to me, is one of the largest disservices we did. We were talking earlier before the show started about COVID funding when they just put it into your account. They didn't ask.
No
They're just
choices.
like, you wake up one morning and you've got your COVID check.
Yeah.
But we can't do that for property taxes. We can't just be like Mrs. Jones, who's 83 years old, who's lived in her home in Townsend, Montana since 1920 that her and her husband bought after the war. Can't just say her property taxes are $1,000 and her rebate is $400 and now her taxes are only $600.
Just credit her account.
We can't do that. We have to go through the tax. We have to fill out a form and we have to fill out a paper. I thought we were the party of less government and less red tape. Now we've just created a whole nother system of paper and trails and just go online and do it. Not everyone has that access.
Yeah. Well, and when you get older, I guess I use that term loosely here, it's really confusing. A lot of them don't have laptops or they definitely can't use their smartphone effectively. It's difficult.
Well, and not only that, but even if you're not in that senior age, we were joking about it too, is like, I have this to do today. I'm dropping off my kid for divisional track. I've got other things going on in my job, and I've got to figure out how to get the dog to the vet and all the things this week.
Yeah.
Thinking about filing for my property tax rebate is probably not on that list and then it's like, and then next week it's, all of these other things and there's a holiday. And why are we making this more complicated to effectively serve Montanans?
It falls below getting my car oil changed and cleaning my house.
Right.
Nobody wants to deal with property taxes.
Right. We don't deal with them until we get that bill and we're like, oh my gosh.
Now it's in your face.
Right. So why are we making this more complicated? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then we look at this new property tax equation stuff. And I saw an interview with a couple gentlemen who said we now as Montanans have the most complicated tax system in America. Congratulations to us? Probably not. Like, this is not helping anyone.
Right. Is that by design, you think?
I would like to say no, but I think it's a result of not working together and coming up with effective policy before we go in there. And again, it goes back to defining who we are and who we're working with and doing the things that our constituents sent us there to do.
Yeah.
It goes back to those basics of communication and what do we want? Are we really listening to our constituents or are we spinning what our constituents are saying for our own ego, for our own benefit, for our
Yeah.
own whatever.
I can't work with them because fill in the blank.
Right.
Oh, well, I can't let anybody think it was their idea. And so I think that's part of the reason why we end up with a real long list of bills that nobody's really clear on, and we don't know combined what it actually does. I can't give a Democrat the credit for any of this.
And when we look
What on earth?
And when we look at this, this is basically a tax shift. It's
Yeah.
not a tax reduction. It is a tax shift. And when you sort through all of it at the end of the day, there's two themes that show up. Number one, it's a tax shift, and every county's different. I mean, you look at the numbers, it depends on where you live as to what that shift looks like. And I can talk a little bit about what I've kind of needled down for our county, but and the other thing is that you shift those taxes, then you've got a whole situation where you've got school funding, and you have county needs, and you have all this. We didn't get property tax relief. We got a property tax shift that reallocates the burden somewhere else.
Which is still on us.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. It didn't go. It
Changes the paper it comes on, but it actually doesn't fix
Right.
anything.
And so when I sat down and I looked at Broadwater counties and I looked at what that looked like, I'm seeing our property tax shift to our agriculturalists, to our commercial people, to our business, our Main Street businesses,
Right.
and even those of us that everybody's like, well, we're going to stop us having a second home. I was talking to a friend of mine in Billings the other day, and he's a divorce attorney, and he said, "Do you know how many couples I've had come to me that says I need to get a divorce on paper so we can keep our primary home, but we can also keep our trust that, my other spouse has because their family put their family ranch or their fishing cabin or whatever in a trust.
Right.
And now we're going to get, just nailed on this trust. And, oh, yeah, by the way, great-grandma left us her little hunting cabin in the Yak, and we use that for family vacations. And now we own 3 pieces of property, and now we are considered a dual family. We own 2 homes, and we've lived in Montana. We're born and raised here and grew up here. When we have families who are talking about divorces on paper because we can't afford the property taxes, we didn't do anybody any favors.
Absolutely. Wow.
And so then we look at it and we go, what is really the implications? And when you sort it all out and you mix all the bills together, Montana's property taxes are going up 3 to 15% depending on what category you fall in. And everybody says, well, no, it says according to this bill, your property taxes are going down. Yep, but when you add in this bill, it goes back up. And so, yes, if you look at one bill at a time and you say, oh, yeah, my property taxes are going to go down, it looks great here. But then when you apply the other bills and the other things that were done in the legislature that weren't necessarily directly related to property taxes, but were related to fees and fines and all this other stuff.
Schools or mills and
all the things, your property taxes didn't go down.
yeah.
So we literally did not do the one thing that Montanans sent us here to do.
Yeah. Yet across the board, they're all taking credit for it.
We did such a great job.
We did such an amazing job. Here, there's so many quotes. Given our 18 members and their 9, we had it in effect a working majority. That was from Pat Flowers. Overall, this budget represents the significant work accomplished by Democrats. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't give them all the credit for this mess.
The budget overall.
You know,
I don't think we really want to talk about the budget, do we?
well, isn't that 18%?
Yeah.
An 18% increase in our budget?
We saw an 18% increase in our state budget. The piece of trivia, when was the last time we held the state budget? 2011. We've increased. We, as a Republican majority, have increased the state budget every year. Now, when I say that to people, they go, well, we have to consider inflation. And I'm like, that's a great topic of conversation. I didn't get an 18% increase in my salary because of inflation. I know people in the corporate world right now who can't give COLAs or cost of living adjustments because their property taxes are going up or their taxes are going up in other ways. So they can't give a COLA adjustment to their employees. They're not getting a raise this year.
And
they're not getting a bonus.
But all the small businesses now are going to have to increase their tax load. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be giving those going forward either.
Right.
What's the option? Give a raise or close the business?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's coming down to. How do we keep the doors open?
It's sobering stuff.
It should be.
And it's stuff that we want to pat ourselves on the back and we want to give ourselves hugs, but we don't understand what we just did to our own communities.
And that is part of the reason why we're doing this. Why we're having some conversations about this, because we have to start asking better questions. We have to start talking to each other, coordinating better. Where are we actually going in Montana and in our community? What are we moving towards?
This isn't a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is a
It's
Montana
not.
issue.
Yeah.
This is a community issue.
Yeah. It's an everybody problem.
Right. And we talk about, one of the other things I hear is we talk about nonprofit statuses and we talk about people who provide nonprofits and all these things. And it's like, oh, nonprofits will just pick it up. Well, you have to understand that even places like Helena Food Share, their property taxes are going to go up. And, those kinds of things are going to affect if a person doesn't have expendable income, they can't donate to nonprofits.
Right.
And as businesses close because they have no other choices, we have a higher unemployment rate.
Right.
We have people who are unemployed. We have people who lose their homes. Is this what we want for Montana? Do we want Montana to become strictly a playground? I don't.
That's the question.
I don't.
Because that's what it seems like. We've made that shift, and that's where we're heading.
Are we trying to get rid of our farmers and ranchers and agriculture in the state of Montana? We sure passed a whole lot of bills against Montana agriculture this session. Agriculture was a huge pawn this session. We're going to cut funding for the weed trust because that's going to show we're going to show we're cutting taxes. Do you understand what the weed trust does? Do you understand that if we don't control noxious weeds, that property is not able to be farmed, able to be ranched, able to be addressed? So we take property out of production? For what purpose? It's scary stuff.
And what do we do about it?
I think we have to learn to work together. And I think now we have to more than ever.
Yeah. And going forward here, I've already seen people, legislators committing to their next session and doing fundraising campaigns and things already. In this and through this, and that's great. But who are you voting for? What are they standing for? And are they willing to sit down and do any of this hard work? Because I didn't see a lot of it. I saw some people trying to, but I think it's such a mess up there.
I heard from a lot of constituents this year that they didn't feel heard.
Yeah.
They didn't feel heard. They would drive from Wolf Point or Alzada or Custer or wherever, and they would drive to Helena and they would pour their heart out over a bill that they really believed in or that really affected them. And their legislator would be like, "Oh, come," and they get the photo op and they do all that, and then they turn around and they go home and they turn around and watch their very own legislator vote against what their own communities have said. And I've heard that from lots of people. Or they supported the state agency and not the constituent. And that's disheartening because how do you keep people engaged? And we hear all the time of, well, everybody's becoming empathetic, so they don't want to be involved in politics. You can only slap a puppy on the nose so many times with a rolled up newspaper.
So why do you think that is? Why they would kind of say one thing and turn around and do another? Do you think that's
There's a lot of reasons.
Trading votes type of thing?
I think that we know that to be able to pass effective legislation, you're going to have to trade votes, you're going to have to work across the aisle, you're going to have to do those things. I think if you don't know that, you go into this completely blind. But I think that the fundamental thing is that what's your reason for running for office? And I think that the whole belief that I'm doing this for my constituents, you can say that, but actions aren't mirroring that. The legislature should not be a resume builder. And I get that it is. I understand. I'm not stupid. But you have to still go home and live in those districts. And your decisions affect those people. And I think sometimes it's very easy to go home and shut the door and be like, I'm not going because of what or I go there and I put forth my own agenda,
Right.
and to heck with the people who sent me there. And so that fundamentally goes back to when we started this conversation of who are we, what do we stand for, and what are we doing?
I think we leave it right there today. That's the magic right there. Well, I think this is a lot to think about. We've tackled some pretty big topics today.
Yeah.
And I look forward to having you on again and discussing some more.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Thank you
for
having me.
thanks for being part of this process, Audrey.
Oh, thank you for
I
having me.
appreciate it.